On this episode of Bite Sized, we are watching and discussing the 45th scene of the movie Twilight. For those of you watching along at home, that's from 106:44 to 109:23. And now, on to the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of Bite Sized. For those of you joining for the first time, here's what's going on. My name's Ben. I am your host. I'm watching the movie Twilight one scene at a time with a different guest every week. I send them anywhere from around 90 seconds to 3 minutes-ish of the movie Twilight with little to no other context, and we talk about that, and only that, or at least that's what we're supposed to do. Sometimes we talk about other things. Joining me today, I have a performer, a musician, and a comedian here in the Chicagoland area. Beth Nelson, welcome to Bite Size.
Hi, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. How's it doing? How's it doing? I'm going to leave that question as it is. How's it doing?
It's doing so good. I'm doing great. I'm very excited. I don't know that I've ever had more to say about less than 3 minutes of content before, so I'm stoked.
Yeah, it's a good one for sure. I am going to start this interview the way I start every interview on the show. That is by asking you, Beth Nelson, what is your history with the Twilight franchise?
Oh my gosh. So my history is storied, despite the fact that I've actually had very little engagement with the materials of Twilight.
When I asked you about this, not to interrupt you immediately,
no, go
but
for
here
it.
we go. When I asked you if you were interested in being on the show, I asked you if you were into Twilight at all, and you're like, yeah, I don't know. You seemed almost non-committal about it. So to hear you now say that it's storied, I can't wait to learn where this is going.
Okay, I was being a little cagey because, well, first of all, I think the amount of Twilight content I've consumed equates to about 75 pages of the first book. And earlier this week, I was telling people I've never seen a Twilight movie. I think that's actually not true. I think I've seen Breaking Dawn Part 1.
Interesting.
Because
why did you drop in at movie 4 out of 5?
I do not remember what context I watched it in, but I remember the sequence of events and super specific scenes. I remember the scene where Bella's shaving her legs after her wedding. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of thing you don't know unless you've seen the whole movie. So I'm surely I've seen the whole thing at some point. I don't remember when. Like I said, a week ago, I was telling people, I've never seen a Twilight movie, but I'm going to be on a Twilight podcast. So that's my engagement with the material, actually consuming it. That being said, I was a Twilight hater when I was younger.
Yeah.
So the first movie came out when I was about 14 years old.
Prime age to get into Twilight.
Truly. I have a twin sister and she was obsessed with it. Mm-hmm. She loved it so much. She read the books multiple times, saw every movie, midnight screenings, would go with a van full of 14-year-old girls. One poor mom drove them all to Carroll, Iowa, which was 30 miles away from my hometown, the nearest movie theater.
Wow.
And meanwhile, I was I'm not going. I don't like Twilight. And it's funny, not that anyone having not engaged with something ever stops them from having a strong opinion about it, but I was such a hater. And I think in retrospect, and this is not a fun thing to admit, but I think I had a touch of not like other girls syndrome.
You're not alone.
Yeah.
Don't feel afraid to admit that. Several of my past guests have used that exact phrase before.
For sure.
Yeah.
I don't think I was necessarily ostracized growing up, but I definitely didn't feel like I fit in. And so I think sometimes it is it feels beneficial to yourself to put yourself in contrast to other people in a way that you sort of have power over. And so I think that's what I was doing. I was I don't like Twilight. I like Jane Campion movies.
You were too busy watching The Piano.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Multiple times in high school. I don't think that was, yeah. Or I have to double check the year, but I'm pretty sure Top of the Lake came out when I was in high school, which I certainly should not have been watching when I was a teenager.
I'm not familiar with it.
Oh, it's a weird one.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That was my engagement with Twilight. I did see the Twilight parody movie Vampires Suck.
Oh boy.
It was bad. It's so bad.
I have not seen it. I wish I could talk more about this, but I am seriously considering a little peek behind the curtain for listeners here. At some point in the future, I do want to do bonus content, and one episode will be going, or multiple episodes will be going over the parody movies, such as Vampire Sucks. Mm-hmm. So maybe this is a nice teaser.
All I'll say about it, just as preview of coming events, is like, even as someone who hated Twilight, I was like, this movie is bad. Like, I can't even have fun with this because it was so dreadful. So I'm interested. I'll look out for that in the future.
I'll give you a short version of a story that I will tell when I go in more in depth into this in a future episode. But I had an opportunity to see it when it came out. I declined, and it kind of immediately regretted it because, like, oh man, I should have gone out with my friends to see a movie even if it was bad. And then about 5, 6, 7 years later, I started doing improv in Houston and found out that one of the guys I was doing improv with was in that movie. And now I regret not seeing it because I could have been like, oh man, I could have seen Brian. Hopefully he'll be on a future episode and we'll talk about this more in depth.
Oh my gosh, that'd be so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about my relationship. I had a brother who was very close in age to me. Not quite twins, but we were like a year and a half apart. So we did a lot of the same stuff growing up. Do you think that your rejection of Twilight was in some way rooted in trying to find an identity outside of that twin? Because 14's around the same age where you start thinking, I am not just this person's relative. Who am I as an individual?
I think that could have been part of it. I think especially because like there was stuff that my sister and I consumed when we were younger. Like we grew up having the Harry Potter books read to us and we both kind of stayed into that. But I think Twilight, we were teenagers at that point. So I think we were kind of trying to figure out differences in our identity. Yeah. And luckily we had really different interests too. Like she was more athletic. I was more like artistic and musical. But yeah, I do think there was maybe an effort to like separate there and to like, I don't know, have a differentiation between the two of us. I also, and I was actually anticipating coming here. I had a question for my sister, which was...
Oh, sorry, do you want to call her up? Or?
No, well, I asked her the question. Yeah. So I was curious because I've heard, and like I've only read the first 75 pages, so I can't really offer like an astute opinion. Yeah. But from what I remember, Bella is like... the way I would describe it is like a mannequin you can project your face on. Like she is not a super like... I hate saying that she's not interesting because that feels a little reductive, but like I do think she's kind of left to be ordinary so that young women can like identify with her and like kind of in a way participate in this romantic fantasy. And I, later in life have since come out as gay. And I wonder if that was part of my like subliminal rejection of Twilight was like I didn't identify with this romance,
having to choose between these two boys.
Yeah. And there are like, other heterosexual romance stories that I loved and still love. Like I read Pride and Prejudice when I was a teenager. I loved the Joe Wright movie, but I think like there was just a sort of different presentation of the heroines in those stories that I could relate to in spite of maybe not identifying with the romance that I don't feel that it is as strong in Twilight, right? If that makes any sense.
No, that makes absolute sense. That was my general first impression. I read the first 100 or so pages of the first book around 2012 or so, just to see what all the fuss was about. And the general sense that I got was like, Bella is written almost intentionally vague so that as many people as possible can relate to her. Yeah. And that is absolutely something that other guests have said. She is, you called her a mannequin. I think a past guest called her a terracotta pot. Oh my God. Put all your hopes and dreams into.
We're all just objecticting Bella.
Kind of.
Turning her into an object.
This is a much more literal objectification. Though.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's in like romance, it's called a Mary Sue protagonist. Sure. And I think that's, and I'm not judging people for enjoying that because I think there's obviously a function to it,
Well, then let's get in with your relatively fresh eyes to the scene we watched today. It's about 2.5 minutes long of Edward showing Bella his bedroom without a bed in it. They go and they play some music and they dance and then he essentially throws her out a window. That's the general overview of the scene. Let's get into the nitty gritty. They're walking up the stairs. They just have a bunch of masks.
That was like the first thing masks are tools of like concealment.
Sure. And we're going to get deep into these masks and what they mean.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll let you continue.
No, you go first.
Well, I was just going to say, like, I think it's interesting that they first of all, I don't think the Cullens should have those masks.
It's a little, I, as in my spare time, my wife and I like to go to estate sales in the sort of wealthier suburbs of Chicago. And this is something that you see a lot of like, things from other cultures used as just sort of wall hangings.
Yeah, I don't know. I was like, and the Cullens are old, so I'm like, best case scenario, this is exoticism. Like worst case scenario,
Right.
it's like some artifact theft or something. But
Sure.
yeah, I was like, interesting. But yeah, masks, tools of concealment, of hiding, and
Right.
then next to them,
Because they wear masks when
Yes.
they're out in public.
and they wear masks with those graduation caps.
Right. But the masks that are on their wall are monsters, are scary figures, and the masks that they have to wear out in public are normal people.
Yeah.
So what does it mean that these monsters have monster masks on the wall? It's some acknowledgement of what they cannot be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, but they do come across the graduation caps, which I think is a genuinely interesting like art piece, I guess, a cool idea for, I assume, Stephanie Meyer to think up.
Graduation caps?
Yeah, it's a private joke. We matriculate a lot.
That's kind of miserable. I mean, repeating high school over and over.
True, but the younger we start out in a new place, the longer we can stay there. Come on.
Of like, yeah, they graduate a lot. Why not turn those caps into an art piece, I guess?
The way they have them displayed too is so cool.
Yeah, it is a good looking, it's framed and they're all overlapping and they're sort of not, it's kind of a gradient
Yeah.
with like browner ones on the left and bluer ones on the right, but there's still just sort of ones in random places. I think it's a good decoration.
Yeah, it looks great.
His exact words are, "We matriculate a lot."
Yeah.
Which is totally him just throwing around a fancy word to impress Bella.
We matriculate a lot.
As much as I want to judge him for that, it is absolutely something I would have done when I was in high school, is use an annoyingly big word when graduate would have done just fine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, also, he uses the big words, but then like I think kind of whiffs it on the pronunciation of Debussy.
Yeah.
Debussy.
Yeah, we'll get into that in
Yeah,
a second.
For sure.
They continue walking upstairs and they go into Edward's room, which is not a bedroom because there's no bed because vampires don't sleep, of course. And we just sort of see what you for an adult we might call an office or a sitting room. There's a chaise lounge. There are blankets on that chaise lounge, which is weird for vampires who, they don't have a body temperature to regulate so much. They are cold all the time and are just fine in the cold. So what would Edward Cullen need with some throw blankets?
That's a great question. And maybe he just likes to be cozy.
Sure, maybe it's a statement.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little accessory to
Maybe.
break up what is a fairly minimalist, pretty monochrome bedroom.
Very modern too. The whole Cullen
Yes.
household is, I feel like with vampires, we have this like tradition of opulence and like, having things that are very old and very ornate because they're so old. I feel like the Cullen household is like, at least from this one short scene and like kind of what I understand of it through like, osmosis.
Yeah.
It seems pretty minimal and like very modern.
It is super. This is something we've talked about in past scenes. Yes, it is a fairly contemporary house design wise. Definitely looks like something that was built just a couple years before filming, which does raise a lot of questions like how long have they been living in that house? They probably just got it rebuilt. I don't know. They walk in through the door to this bedroom, and on the opposite wall are some double doors
That are just open.
that are open and don't really lead out to anything.
No.
There is what you could charitably call a ledge out there, maybe a foot of sort of walkway, but it just there's not a balcony, there's no railing. It just opens up to the forest and like a 20-foot drop. Which for a vampire makes sense if you're able to jump up straight directly into your bedroom. Cool, good for you. But it really makes me wonder, did the architect or the builders that installed those doors, that's not up to code. What did they think when they were building this?
This is always my question with like horror movies too, is like people will have like these crazy like tiled basements with like drains and stuff in horror movies. And I'm like,
or like trap doors and things like that.
Yeah, and it's like at what point? I mean, this is kind of like a pedantic CinemaSins view
Gotta
of things.
suspend your disbelief a little
right?
bit.
Exactly, but it does. You do have to wonder what do the contractors think they're doing when they
Right.
build a 20-foot drop?
And that's absolutely the kind of thing that you would, I feel like if you're a vampire, you're trying to lay low. And that is a design choice that you would absolutely if you built that, you would absolutely say, yeah, man, one time I built a house and I installed doors that opened to nothing.
Yeah.
That is not, it's not super subtle. Like, at least put in a balcony with railing. Just give yourself an extra, 3 feet to jump. You're fine.
And also did, I don't know. I don't know how contracting works, but, did they make him sign a waiver or something? Like, hey, you can't take us to court if one of you falls off this.
Yeah, that's because if this was a business building or something like that, there would be OSHA regulations that would not be allowed.
Absolutely
I guess
not.
for a house you have more freedom, and maybe they found some especially libertarian architects and builders that are just sure, man, you want to drop in every bedroom? Go for it. I'm not going to ask any questions.
You're paying us those big Cullen dollars.
Yeah,
so
I
we'll,
guess.
we'll build whatever you want.
I guess they can afford that.
And the doors being wide open is also kind of odd.
Yeah, because we've already, the whole reason they live in this area is because of how rainy it is basically all the time. Mm-hmm. In a room full of books, you're just sort of asking for mildew.
Maybe that's why he has the blanket too, is to shield. Maybe he doesn't like the feeling of wind.
But then the blanket's going to get wet too.
Yeah.
And he's just going to have, speaking as someone who grew up around a lot of humidity, that's just going to get damp and cling to you in a weird, unfortunate way.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Speaking of books and blankets, he's got a chaise lounge. He's got a bunch of books. Mm-hmm. He's got a lot of old antiques in there. He's got an old-timey radio. He's got an old-timey camera. He's got some sort of weird device that looks like it's maybe supposed to be for reading books. There's some sort of platform, and then some weird eyepieces that look like they have magnifying glass lenses in them. Let me see if I can find a good shot of this so that you can know what I'm talking about. Talking about that thing back there, I'll try to post a good screen grab of this when I post the episode. But it looks like I thought it was maybe an old-timey microscope at first, but it's got two binocular eyepieces that it looks like you lean down and put your face directly on, and then there's maybe something back there that it helps you read. I truly have no idea what that is.
I don't know either. We need a dramaturge in here.
It's a fun, or an Antiques Roadshow assessor.
Oh yeah, that's probably better.
Yeah, all I'm saying is the art department and the set designers really went all out in putting this one together.
Yeah, they found some old stuff.
I appreciate their hard work. Beth, if you were a 100-year-old immortal who did not sleep, what would be in your bedroom that didn't have a bed in it?
I love a really comfy couch, a long couch, because I'm not a short person. I need a long couch. I want to be head to toe, nothing hanging off.
Yeah.
I would probably be a little like Edward and keep some, books around, keep some CD. I do love a CD. I drive a car that has a CD player, so okay. I keep those around. And you know what? I think I would just those little Vision Masters?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The little click through the wheels and things like that.
I love those things.
Okay.
I love looking at the little things. I love the sound they make when you do the clicking. So that could keep me entertained for a lot of hours, I think.
That makes sense. Yeah, I'd probably have a lot of books too, a nice chair.
Yeah.
I feel much like Edward, I would definitely have a collection of gadgets and electronics that I've acquired over the years.
Yeah. Old funky things. I'd love a zoetrope. That'd be really cool.
Yeah.
Or zoetrope?
I don't know.
I think it's zoetrope, but
I know.
We'll get that Antiques Roadshow guy to correct us.
Yeah. I know personally, between my apartment here and my parents' attic back in Houston, I still have, every video game console I've owned going back to the 90s and things like that. I'm slow to get rid of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I would probably, if I existed out of time like he does, that would probably get a lot worse. Clothes too.
Yeah.
I hold on to clothes for way too long.
Oh, no. I did find out during the pandemic that I can play the video game Stardew Valley for a solid 6 hours on end.
Yeah.
And I'm still not tired of it. I'm not playing it quite that much anymore, but that would probably also, having a desktop. I do prefer desktop. It's available on a lot of different systems, but I prefer computer and mouse. And every evening I could probably just harvest some pumpkins. And
frankly, there are games like that I really only stop playing because I have to go to sleep. But if I didn't sleep, I feel like if I was Edward, I would definitely spend, 3 or 4 full days playing one game without realizing what had happened. That's a real risk that they don't get into the 2008 movie Twilight. But I feel like if it took place in 2024, Alice has played The Sims 3 for a full week without stopping.
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine?
Yeah. I can.
I feel like too, as a creative person, you like to think, oh, if I had all the time in the world, I would just fill it with writing and practicing instruments and all of that stuff. And I like to think I do a little bit more of that, but I also know realistically, like when I have a day off, I'm just kind of vegetating.
Yeah.
So.
Edward definitely has a lot of books just sort of scattered and open to various places.
Yeah.
Like he's reading a good 9 or 10 books at once. And I feel like if I could, I would probably, and like I'm guilty of that too. There's definitely 3 books by my bedside that all have bookmarks in them, but I feel like I would get a little better at starting a book and then finishing it.
So canonically, is Edward like really smart, or is?
I think canonically all of them are.
Okay.
Because they're so bored.
Yeah.
Because they essentially have a full 24 hours. They don't have to sleep. They've been alive for 100 years, and they've been going to high school over and over again. So like all of the child age Cullens are. They are very familiar with what you learn in high school. They all speak a bunch of different languages because, and especially this is something I talked about with a past guest that is really casts Edward in a different light. He's the only one in this house that does not have a partner.
I think I heard this podcast because isn't that what you guys mentioned? Like that's what they do at night, and like Edward doesn't get to do that because he's single. So.
Right, so he's like better read than the others, which is such a weird something I never considered about Edward the character, but is definitely true.
Yeah,
he just stays up at night reading, listening to one or more of the other couples in his house.
Dang,
just going to town.
Wow, I mean, I guess you live that long, you read that much, you're probably going to be smart.
Yeah,
so.
you're kind of dead to it.
Yeah,
I guess. Edward has a lot of music. He has CDs, he has records, he has all that.
Wow, you have so much music. What are you listening to?
Debussy. I don't know.
Yeah. Clair de Lune is great.
I do want to say, I think it's funny to say he has a lot of music and to do a close-up of one shelf as opposed to like a wide shot of a lot of different music. Just filmically, that's kind of a funny choice to make.
Yeah, like my uncle has a lot of music. He has like 2 big shelving units right next to each other that are like full of Bruce Springsteen CDs.
Yeah.
And Edward has like a shelf.
Yeah, and I'm sure he has more, but like it just, showing a close up, it doesn't show an expanse of a certain item. So I just thought that was a little funny choice that they made.
Right.
But yes, listening to Clair de Lune. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She knows what it is, and he seems a little bit impressed by this. It's a very awkward conversation, but what feels kind of real when, you're sharing your favorite music with your high school crush. A little bit of realness. I just turned on the metronome. We don't need that. A little bit of realism to that.
Well, speaking of metronomes, they try to dance.
Excellent segue. Now my editor has to leave that.
Yes. Oh, amazing. Yeah. They try to dance to Clair de Lune.
Yes. Not a good song to dance to.
A terrible song to dance to.
Very slow.
Very slow. So the marking is andante très expressif.
Oh, très bien.
Which is, it's meant to be sort of pushed and pulled and like, it doesn't, and even with the meter, it's in 9/8 time. Like it's just an incredibly tricky song to like feel any sense of rhythm for.
And like especially this arrangement, which is just a piano, there's a lot of long rests in there where there is no music, and it is up to you, the dancer, to keep going and hope that you sort of are doing the right thing.
I did want to share the translation. So Clair de Lune, the song by Debussy, or as Edward would say, Debussy, is based on a poem by a French poet named Paul Verlaine. And I'm going to read you a translation by an individual named Richard Stokes, if that's okay.
I can't wait.
Okay. Your soul is a chosen landscape, bewitched by maskers and burgomaskers, playing the lute and dancing and almost sad beneath their fanciful disguises. So guess what? We have a callback to some masks.
Oh my God.
Even Clair de Lune is about masks. It continues, singing as they go in a minor key of conquering love and life's favors. They do not seem to believe in their fortune, and their song mingles with the light of the moon. The calm light of the moon, sad and fair, that sets the birds dreaming in the trees and the fountains sobbing in their rapture, tall and spelt amid marble statues.
marble statues like the Cullens.
Like the Cullens.
Wow.
And I think too, like Clair de Lune is an incredibly like, it's a beautiful song, but it's also like really sad.
Yes.
And you know, again, I don't know everything about Twilight, but in seeing Breaking Dawn Part 1, like there's a lot of pain in Edward and Bella's relationship. Like in that movie, like when Bella gets pregnant, like her back like breaks in half. She gets incredibly like sick and, you know, incredibly emaciated. She has to turn into a vampire at the end, which looks like an incredibly painful process.
Yeah. We'll get there in about 6 years.
Yes, amazing. Yeah, I know. That'll be a great scene. Oh, can't wait.
It's a few movies away.
But just like this, I mean, this poem is one of both like beauty and pain, and it talks about the nocturnal, which of course is very prevalent for vampires. I think it's interesting, and I think that level of like detail in using the song. This might be the best movie of all time.
I mean, it's high art. Step aside, Jane Campion.
Yeah.
Power of the Dog. Never heard of it.
Oh my God.
Do you think like I think it's mentioned in the book. Do you think that deep level of meaning and symbolism was intentional on the part of Stephanie Meyer, or is it just a happy accident?
It might just be a happy accident.
There could be a little meaning
bit
to it, because, you know, it at the first, you know, if you go one step down into the symbolism, Clair de Lune, moonlight, these sort of nocturnal, you know, creatures of the night, something like that. But yeah, as you dig deeper into Clair de Lune, there is definitely a lot to relate back to Twilight.
I'm reading this book. It's called, it's either Venus and Aphrodite or Aphrodite and Venus. I can't remember which order it's in. But it talks about how in Homeric Greek, like the words eros and eris, so eros and eris, are very close to one another.
Yeah.
But eros is romantic love, and eris is like pain and like
the goddess of strife and chaos. Yeah.
Or sorry, I'm kidding. let me push.
No, this is our most intellectual for the listener. Beth just literally pushed some glasses.
That's what I'm like. Let me push my glasses up the bridge of my nose. But yeah, and like I read another book earlier this year called Eros the Bittersweet, and it's a great book. Highly recommend it. But and she talks too about how like desire is lack, and it's wanting something and not having it. If you have something, you don't desire it, you just have it.
Right.
And I think Twilight, like it's a story of like the pain of like wanting something that is, you know, in this case dangerous, right? Like Edward, doesn't he's like wants to drink her blood. He says something about her being like heroin or something.
Yeah, that's already happened. Yeah.
And that's all there in Clair de Lune.
Speaking of beautiful romantic dialogue like that, they're dancing, and Bella says she can't dance, which, as we've discussed, not entirely her fault with this song.
Yeah.
Bad choice of song to dance to. Definitely weird to just kind of awkward. And the way Edward initiates the dance, you can't tell. Is it a kiss? Is it a dance? It's just a bad situation. And then he says, I can make you, which is a weird thing to say.
It is a weird thing to say.
That's a red flag. And then she says, I'm not scared of you. And then he says, you really shouldn't have said that, which is an even worse thing to say.
Yeah.
Kids listening to this show, if your high school crush says those things to you, just go. That's not a relationship worth being in.
No. They should definitely listen and respect your boundaries.
Yeah.
That's very important. To all the kids listening to this episode.
To all my young people. Right. Learn.
And to the adults too, you know?
Yeah, I guess so.
Everybody.
Should you find yourself in this situation?
Yeah.
This is not a realistic portrayal of a healthy relationship.
I do think it kind of circles back to, I think a lot of, because Bella's awkward, right? This is an awkward protagonist. And I think like this is not a scenario you'd want to happen in real life, right? Like if you didn't want to dance, you wouldn't want someone to like make you. But I do think like if you're an awkward teenage girl, like there's probably something appealing about being like, I'm so awkward, and someone's like, no, I'm gonna make you. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I think like the fantasy of it is a little less insidious than like seeing something like that in real life. And I understand why like people would see that and be like, oh, that's cute. I love Edward.
And like the sort of repressed sexuality that you can only get in a young adult novel of like what would in an adult romance be straightforward sexual tension. But in their high schoolers, so they just have to be kind of, they're dancing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And he could overpower her through dance.
So in real life, obviously, I'm like, no, don't make people dance. But in the romantic fantasy, I could see why people would be interested in that. So
yeah. If you're going to make someone dance, make sure you've discussed it beforehand.
Yes, please.
You have enthusiastic consent.
And maybe practice,
take dance lessons.
Go to
fun.
a class. Yeah, absolutely.
I've done it.
Yeah.
He grabs her and they whoosh away and the scene ends. Where do you think they're going? As someone who has not seen the next part of the movie.
Well, I do know. So I don't know if this is what it is, but I have an idea if.
Sure, I'll hear it. I'm not going to tell you if you're right or wrong.
I've heard Hang On Spider Monkey before.
Interesting.
Is that
that may
next?
or may not happen in the next episode we talk about?
Okay, all right.
Cool. Let's start to wrap up this episode. I'm going to ask you the last question of the interview portion. If you had to give the scene a name, what would it be? And this is going to be the name of the episode, so make it good. And you told me you've listened to a few episodes, so you knew this question was coming.
I did know it was
and
coming.
It better be extra good.
Okay. Does it have to be something I've said, or can
No,
it be...
absolutely. It can be literally anything you want at all. And I am honor bound to make that the title of the episode.
Beautiful. I think I'm going to go with Musty Blanket.
Musty Blanket. Yeah, that's beautiful. We talked a lot about art and the meaning and symbolism of music and masks, but we're going with Musty Blanket.
Yeah.
That'll really, but I like that, because if I didn't know what this show was and I saw an episode titled Musty Blanket, I would want to learn more about that.
And then you listen to a whole episode where you hear 2 seconds about a musty blanket.
Musty Blanket, and a lot about
the nature of desire,
right? And about andante,
très expressif.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Speaking of learning more about things, if listeners want to learn more about you, perhaps follow you on social media, see you perform comedy live, where can they do that sort of thing?
Yes, you can. I am on Instagram at Little Bep. That's BEPP, as in poplar. I never remember.
Poplar, yeah.
I never remember what the NATO words are, so I just make
Papa.
them up.
You were actually very
Popeye.
close.
Oh, okay. And you can catch me in Blank with Ben, our fabulous drummer. Lost Realms, Voila over at IO, and then in November and December we will be doing a Jeff eligible run of the musical Little Orphan Boy at the Annoyance.
Okay, so just go to a comedy show in Chicago.
Yeah.
And there's a decent chance Beth will be there. If you want to follow the show on social media, you can do so at bitesizedpod_ on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, where you will find little clips of the show that I've put pictures to and posted in very digestible, real format and stuff like that. If you want to send an email to the show, you can send an email to myfavoritetwilightpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to support the show, please like, subscribe, share, tell your friends about it, leave a review, that sort of thing that you're supposed to do to podcasts and shows, whatnot, in the year 2024. I don't have to say it. You already know to do it. If you want to support the show in a very much more direct financial way, you can go to twilightpodcast.com/store, where you can learn how to buy a sticker or maybe even sponsor an episode if I get around to putting that up yet. Thank you to my editor, Ben Oxher, for putting this show together. Thank you to the band Swimwear Department for letting me use their song Mauled to Death as our theme. And thank you to Beth for analyzing that song when we're done with this. Thank you to Kellen Lutz for no particular reason. You know what is up. That is it. That is all we have for today's episode. As we always say at the end of every episode of Bite Sized,
yum yum.
Yum yum. That's it. See you next time.
Debussy.